We were at HQ on the weekend, weren't we, Goodey?
Yeah, we were at the Lock at Twickenham, hosting the corporate hospitality with myself, obviously, Andy Rowe, lead host. Jim, you were missed. You were up in Scotland working.
Yeah, I didn't miss it though.
Although you didn't miss much England-Wales. We'll get onto that in a minute. But we had Andy Powell there, loose.
Yeah,
one of the loosest lines I think I've ever heard in a corporate hospitality suite.
Oh my gosh!
I won't mention that one. But and we also had Chris Ashton. I think he definitely took some tramadol just before he went on stage.
That's what he does. Nervous.
Sleepy.
Well, whenever Chris Ashton goes on stage or TV, he must be shitting himself because he takes the tramadols, doesn't he? And then it's like... I'm joking, Ashley. I love
Imagine if you had taken tramadols before that first half.
Well, that was the first half, tramadol.
the tramadol half.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to pump it up, and I was generally excited to watch England at Twickers on Saturday with a better team than in terms of selection around experience and the big names that were back in. And it looked more of there's still other players to come back in, obviously Genji would start and Anthony Watson, probably Manu. But it looked more of a England first team. Let's see how good we are and see where we're at. And wasn't the best. That first half, I think the best thing that happened at Twickenham in the first half was the band in the crowd. I can't work out the band though. Why are they still wearing masks? They're a band with trumpets and things. They've got masks on.
What are they called?
COVID's over, lads.
Yeah, but that might be part of their brand.
The masked brand.
The brand.
The masked band.
The masked brand band.
Yeah. Anyway, it was that first half. Second half got a lot more interesting for obvious reasons with different narratives that we'll talk about. But the first half was dull as ditch water.
Let's just skip it then. Talk about how did Wales lose that?
Line out. Because they ain't got a line out.
Tell the line out that.
Absolutely. I'm going to say it.
They've got issues at hooker though. You lose your captain.
Yeah, but they've always had issues at line outs.
You blaming Alan Wynne still?
His legacy. And they've got a great coach. Jonathan Humphreys was my line-out coach and scrum coach for Scotland. It was brilliant. I had a great relationship with him. We had one of the best line-outs in the world under him. So
Lies.
There's a number of different things, but there's a few things into the mix for that. I won't go into too many details because there's loads to talk about, but England got a very good defensive line-out with Courtney Laws, Marrow, and whatever lock they put in there, whether it's George Martin or Johnny Hill that comes on. So that they've got three of the very best in the middle. But their line-out was operating at 65%.
That is Scotland stats, Jim Hamilton, at the height of your career.
I don't usually use stats, but I wanted to have a look. They had 17 line-outs, and out of that, they lost 35% of them. Not good.
How many did they lose then, Jim?
I can't. Do you know off the bat or not? A lot.
6.
There you go. Really, did you just do that quick?
That was a guess.
Oh, was it? Well, whatever
it right?
was. Whatever it was.
It's in the run sheet.
There you go.
Is it?
There you go.
There you go.
In bright red.
I knew
So
how
that
working
and
numbers, foreign
scrum.
exchange.
Scrum and line out. And again, the boring parts of the game, which we're talking about, a very boring first half. I thought the second half was better.
Yeah.
You are not winning test matches like that against South Africa. New Zealand, albeit they wing it a bit, the line out, they've still got a very good line out. Scotland, France, Ireland, obviously, one of the best line outs. You ain't winning test matches like that. And that, for me, there was a number of things into the mix, but that was the biggest thing. Yeah. You couldn't win a line out.
Yeah.
Did I say they couldn't win a line out?
They couldn't win a line out. And Jim, you should be the line out coach. I've said that.
No interest. They've got a very good line out coach.
Do you think that's what Gatlin was referring to when he said he found out about a few players?
Well, he did mention about I couldn't find out. He was talking about a kick after the game. A kick where they missed touch.
Yeah, Biggs. I know Biggs missed a penalty kick to touch.
Yeah, maybe.
Owen Williams did as well, I think. But it was a culmination of a number of errors. You get to 17-9 up, and England are down, and we'll get onto the whys and wherefores. England were down to 12 players. And then, effectively, kickoff goes wrong. You're gifting possession back to England. England tail the drive and line out that. Like the positives for England were line out defence, Ben Earl, and... we were talking before the game. 15 caps. That was his 16th cap. That was his first start. And he has been the best player in the Premiership over at least the last 2 years.
What about when his top got taken off?
He's loving it, wouldn't he? I'd be panicking.
Tense.
Back in the day, I'd be panicking.
Not if you look like that, you wouldn't.
No, I wouldn't, but I never looked like that, did I? But he was loving it. The crowd went wild because his top's off. He's got abs galore and he can cheer a lot as well. Ben Earl was fantastic. I'm so pleased for him because we've talked him up on here quite a lot, haven't we? About purely off the back of his own ability of how he plays. He's a lovely kid, as you know, Jim. And we're like, how's he not getting picked? And there are good players in those positions, obviously Curry and...
I think now you can pick him as an 8.
You can pick him across the whole back row.
I think he starts at 8.
Yeah.
I think he did that much powerful work with ball in hand that you're like, we could pick him as an 8.
And this is the thing we've been talking about. It ain't a surprise he's doing it, right? Because he does it week in, week out for Saracens. Yeah, Eddie wouldn't pick him, Borthers wouldn't pick him to start games. And there you go, first start, head and shoulders above any other player on the pitch.
Counter-rucking, carrying... Jackling,
cheering.
Yeah.
He loves
that. Yeah.
He loves a cheer return.
I like that as a player. I've gone off it a bit, especially when you're playing so poorly.
Yeah. But yeah, for Wales, and Gats was talking about, he learned a few things about players, the pressure and the errors when actually they should have stuck their foot on our throat with 3 men. Well, I say 3 men off the field. I was going to say 3 men in the bin, but Faz's was a red. Down to 12, and you've scored a wonderful try, cutting England to shreds because of the numbers, effectively. Go and do it again. Go and just turn the tide and put all the pressure back on England and say, go from 17-9 to 24-9. And then it's game over. But England, fair play. These players just want to win at everything they do. Whether they're playing table tennis, whether they're just playing cards or... Do you know what I mean? And so there is that in England, and it's always been, you go back to the DNA of English rugby, driving game, line out, set piece. The scrum was a mess again for every team, which is becoming a bit of a theme, isn't it, I think? I'm watching both games this weekend, and scrums were messy as you like.
Yeah.
But, positives for England, line out defence, Ben Earl basically, and then line out defence, the rest of it. Pre-season game.
Yeah.
Errors, there were a lot of errors, but Wales, if you Gats, you raging. I loved Gats' interview afterwards because he was honest, he was raging. It wasn't a politician's answer.
I think you're a bit harsh on Borthers.
I didn't say it was about Borthers.
Yeah, I know, but you did. You were implying that.
He was better actually after the game. To be fair to Borthers.
Look, should we just talk about that? Because I like Borthwick. I'm not just saying that. Like I do. He's new into that role. How long's Gats been in that role?
Yeah,
like on and off with the Lions.
Comfortable, Gats.
Well, comfortable. Like it's not comfortable, is it? Like you're not taking the job to be front and centre of media. Like Eddie Jones has just gone full rogue. Gregor's not amazing in that space. Like Andy Farrell's not amazing in that space.
I think they're good.
Like
Gregor's interview pre-match, they were like, "Oh, you went 17 points down."
Oh, he's much,
week.
Yeah, but
he's like, "Well, we did that in the Six Nations as well."
Yeah, but we're playing well, so it's easier for him to do.
Yeah.
Like with Borthers, like I think they've all come out and said like that's his big work on, which is everything else he's amazing at. That is a hard thing to be. You can't just switch on and be charismatic and engaging, all that. But like it's the hard thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's when you're not playing that well and you've got the weight of a nation, expectation, all these different things. Like when he's getting asked after the game, like, what do you think of Faz's red card? He can't answer. He can't answer that.
All he can say is, and Gats was very candid in that. So I can read Gats pretty well. Gats is like, he's got previous, but I hope it's not too bad. He's just poking the bear.
Because he knows they could face them in the quarters.
Yeah. And there was a bit of that edge in that second half, wasn't there?
But that's what you want.
Yeah,
like, with all this, like you want a bit of drama and like talking points. And England aren't giving us anything, but the fact that they're not giving us anything almost gives us something to talk about. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
But I do feel for Borthers in that space that everyone's like, he needs to give us more, needs to do this. There's an argument to put up someone else if he doesn't want to do that. Like, I know he's the head coach or whatever.
He was a lot better after the game, I thought.
Well, he knows he needs to work on it because I think I'm almost contradicting what I've said before. You've got a responsibility as a coach, not just to coach your team, but you need to engage, especially now, this time in rugby, engage with the fans and bring in people to bring on the journey and all these different things. But I've got a lot of respect for Borthers. I like what he stands for, what he's done, and I also know that it's not easy to get up there and do that, especially when your team aren't playing well, especially when the headlines out of it are, Farrell getting sent off and is probably not going to make it until the quarterfinals. If
keep him fresh for the quarters, eh?
Well, there you go.
Let's talk about the card then, the red card, and then what those implications might be for the World Cup. Definitely a red card.
100% a red card. I saw it as they were breaking out, and there was a little bit of ag before, wasn't there, with Basham? and there's no defending it. It's a red card, and I've said it over the years.
You have.
It's going to happen. Like his technique, and I don't want to go too hard, but his technique's never changed, has it? Really? You know, he walloped Charlie Atkinson once, and then there was the case against Gloucester. There's been others where it's been borderline, but that is part of his strength and part of his biggest weakness. And we're seeing the biggest weakness is he's got it half an inch, 2 inches wrong, and it's going to be very costly. But that is the danger of tackling upright and throwing your shoulder like that. And I'm not defending it here at all for everyone that's going to be like, you're trying to defend him. I'm not. That's him and his character. He's been to tackle school. Well, I've heard tackle school is basically a presentation. That's not going to happen. So to me, it's a clear red card. There's no mitigation. And you look at then what's going to happen off the back of it. Obviously, the hearings on Tuesday, which everyone listening to the podcast will be today. There'll be a delay, obviously, around what the punishment is, and it'll probably come out Wednesday. But it's a mid-range entry point, without a shadow of a doubt.
Which is what?
Minimum 6 weeks. So it starts at 6 weeks, and then it can mitigate down off the back of other things. So there's mitigation around his conduct. Okay, he went to say sorry to Basham. Does he plead guilty or not guilty? Mitigation around that. It's clearly guilty. He can't go in there and say not guilty, can he? Because it's a clear red card. And then previous history of other incidents, he's had a few. So he's had tackle school as well. So I think a lot of things will go against him on that sense. I've got a feeling they'll go 6 weeks and might reduce it for 1 because he's going to say he's guilty. So you're admitting it. You're going to say sorry. And people will be like, that shouldn't count for anything. I agree. I think it should be a 6 week ban, no mitigation, no cutting anything back, because we've been here before. And I want to see Owen Farrell at a World Cup, as I'm sure a lot of people do. And he's England's captain. But I also don't think they should go leniently on him because of those reasons, because it is a World Cup. I believe everything that's gone on before, it should be a 6 week ban. The facts are Basham fails his HIA. So one of the things in the judicial sort of protocols around where you go, was the player injured? Did he suffer an injury? Well, yeah, he did. He got sparked. Not knocked out cold, but he's failed his HIA. So there are concussion symptoms there for Basham, which you have to take into account. The history of him having the issues with previous records of bans, you can't get away from it. So 6 weeks, which in reality that takes out the Ireland warm-up game this weekend coming, the Fiji warm-up game the weekend after, and then the 4 group games, and it's a real shame.
What a mess.
Yeah.
When you break it down.
But he'll be fresh for the quarters when we dust up Wales again, probably. I'm joking.
What a mess.
Who knows? It is a mess, yeah. But that's where we're at, though.
Goodey's said it. He said it for years, and it's coming the way that he plays. And that just, yes, the ultimate competitor, but ultimately the ultimate competitor has cost himself something that's going to happen, right? So he's cost himself the captaincy leading into the start of the World Cup. Like, it's big. Like, I don't know, George Ford came on. You think about what we've chatted about. He did very well. But we've chatted about Owen Farrell, about how good he's arguably been the best 10 in the world over the last year when he's come into, off the back of his injury, come into a bit of form, been made captain. And it's not as if it's an accidental act. It's a move, a mechanism that we've seen him do many, many times. Yeah. And I know, Goodey knows, and lads who play the game know, changing your tackle technique is easier said than done. When you're in the moment, under fatigue, like that kind of tackle that he's done before, where you're kind of covering in your upright and there's a slight adjust from Tane Basham, they're not easy tackles to go in there and chop. But you see now players, the way that they go in, like Grant Gilchrist, perfect example, when he got red carded against France last year for banging Geelong.
Yeah.
Absolutely smoking him off kickoffs. That was his point of difference. I'm watching him now tackle off the kickoffs, and he's passive.
Yeah.
Let's just make the tackle. We try and get the charge down.
Yeah.
And that needs to be the switch in Faz's mind.
It's hard for him.
It's hard.
And I go back to when I played. I tackled very upright. There was no power behind it or much intent or anything. But I was always coached hit high, because then I was good at wrapping onto the ball to create a maul to get the turnover. So I'd be hating it now, but you have to adapt as players, and that's clearly what Faz has got, that animal instinct in him to try and stick the shoulder in and hurt someone. And you get it slightly wrong, and unfortunately, that's where we are.
And then it carries on after. Like, you watch him after, like him and, I know there's an altercation between him and Bigger. You know, Faz is like he's fueled, isn't he? By like he's a northerner. He's a Farrell. That's what he is. That's who he is.
It's the red mist.
It is the red mist, yeah. And he has that red mist in him. And as captain, you think about the best. Dupont doesn't look flustered.
Doesn't even sweat. Doesn't even
any
sweat.
point from the anthem. I watched him at the weekend. We can get onto him. Like, he's the best player I think we're ever going to see, and he's playing now in this time. Doesn't look flustered. You look at Richie McCaw. You look at Sia Khaleesi. You look at even Martin Johnson when he was captain. In 2000.
He had the rage of
it. But as captain, he knew. Like, and the game was different there. You've got to be able to manage that. Yeah. It is your number one thing. Yeah. You are captain. You are the leader. You are the one that needs to speak to the referee. We can count Jamie Ritchie as well about how he does that isn't perfect.
Was he the ref at the weekend, Jamie Ritchie?
Well, we can get on to that. But I think for Faz, like, if this, it doesn't get any worse, does it? Like, this doesn't get any bigger. And losing your captain for the start of the World Cup. Yeah. And I mean, will he pick him?
Yeah, you have to. Well, because he's picked 3 fly halves, you've got space to keep him. But it'd be interesting if it was another player. And on that, when you talk about other players, Ellis Genge is a player that used to lose his nut quite a lot, didn't he? He has toned that back, and maybe a little bit to the detriment of
the way that he plays.
He plays, but we're not seeing Ellis Genge getting in scraps and doing all that stuff anymore, are we? And I feel bad because I wrote a column for Rugby Pass about Faz being at 10. Now England need to stand up and show us who they are. The headline on the Twitter feed was "Time for the real England Rugby to stand up with Faz at 10." Well, he stood up in the tackle, didn't he? So, sorry, it's my fault, lads. He stood up and he whacked him with his shoulder in the tackle. There we go.
Let's look at what England are going to do now then. Marcus Smith, does he just get given the keys? Obviously, you've got George Ford there as well. Like,
no.
What's happening? What are they going to do?
Well, I always said at this World Cup, under Steve Borthwick, you need to start Faz at 10, and then you need Marcus Smith on the bench as a point of difference. Because if you have George Ford on the bench, he comes on for Owen Farrell, and it's same, but less aggressive, which clearly is a good thing. George Ford did exceptionally well when he came on at the weekend, and he's obviously a kind of coach player where he's coaching the team, and he's very similar in terms of. I think he'll start George Ford. Our first 2 games are actually we've got to go to Ireland this weekend, which
Marcus starts in. George starts first game.
Pretty tough. He probably starts Marcus Smith this weekend in the Bear Pit of Dublin, where the Irish come for us, and then he goes back to George against Fiji. He probably starts George Ford against Argentina. And do you know what? George Ford, off the back of how he played in that cameo that he came off the bench for. So when George Ford comes on, I'm thinking, they're going to take Faz off. Because the whole 10-12 thing hasn't worked for England over the last couple of years with George at 10 and Faz at 12. And I've been vocal around Faz is our 10, play him at 10. George comes on, they take Henry Arundel off, and then they rejig the back line, so Faz goes to 12, Ollie Lawrence goes to 13, Marchant goes to the wing. So you're moving 3 players around to bring 1 player on, which I don't think makes sense. But George Ford, when he came on, pulled the strings, understands game management better than most 10s, and I think he'll start with George Ford, have Marcus Smith on the bench, and you can then carry Farrell in a squad, and it's all dependent on how long he gets as a ban. If he gets 4, 6, he gets over 6, you can't pick him. But if you get 6, you've then possibly got him for a quarter-final.
Having not played.
But isn't he in some ways loosely part of the coaching group for this team?
Yeah.
The way that he runs things?
Yeah.
So you would take him?
I think, 100%. And it's all dictated to, and as Steve said afterwards, he'll deal with the facts as they come out, and the facts are they've got a lawyer that's going to get involved and a barrister to defend him, and they're hoping that he gets it less than 6 weeks. The whole world will be looking at this going, and the wording around it and how the report comes out and the whole piece around the ban is this and this is why. The wording on that is so crucial around the feeling around the world, because I'm an England fan, I want Faz to be there, but I also think he deserves a 6-week ban. Imagine if he gets 6 reduced to 3 because he said sorry and he's a good bloke. All that stuff he's had before. The wording's really important on that, and then that dictates what Steve does off the back of it.
Gut feeling. What do you reckon?
6, maybe 5.
I reckon 5.
Yeah.
Which will make him available for what?
Some more.
Samoa. I reckon 5 weeks.
Pod.
Rugby pod.